Hey, what's happening? Welcome to the Pleasure Points Podcast. I'm your host, James Rohr. Thank you so much for being here. This is a fun one. Jen is back. It seems like it's becoming Jen's show, and I'm just happy to be here. Hey, whatever works. We are talking a lot about food in this episode. So if you've got food triggers, if you're in the middle of a meal, you might want to just consider yourselves warned. We talk about all sorts of stuff when it comes to food. And there's an invitation at the end for you to consider how you eat. And we're all in this together. So thank you guys so much for being here and enjoy the show. All right, and here we are. Jen, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're becoming a regular.
I just love it here.
Great.
Pleasure Points Podcast is #1 in my books.
I think the people love you.
Hey, I love them too.
That's nice.
It really is nice. It's like warm, fuzzy Care Bear life.
That's how I feel about our broccoli.
Oh my gosh, yes. Our broccoli is so amazing.
We just grew our first broccoli and we harvested it the other day. We haven't eaten it yet, but I'm shocked at how huge the plant is to just yield one broccoli.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy considering how much broccoli I eat. I was like, oh my God, for us to actually have broccoli, I would have to turn the whole backyard into a broccoli greenhouse.
Yeah, you would need many acres of land.
I love broccoli.
Fill your broccoli needs.
I eat so much broccoli.
Can broccoli be preserved? Like, can people, like, you can't can broccoli, can you?
I think you can whatever you want.
That's so weird.
It probably tastes horrible though. Like,
right?
Think about how stinky broccoli can be.
Where does broccoli come from, like, in the wintertime?
Winter, winter broccoli.
I wonder where they grow it from. This is a horrible way to start a podcast. I could have just, like, had all these answers and looked it up.
My guess would be South America because they're opposite seasons.
Probably, right? But maybe it grows, like, awesome in Georgia or something in the winter. Who knows? Florida? What do they grow in Homestead?
I don't know. It might get kind of, like, cool. I think it would depend on the zone. I don't know what zone broccoli grows in.
I did when I was living in Miami, I did one of those, like co-op, like, food delivery things, like farmers local things.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of sucked because for, like, a couple of months, it was just like we got some random vegetables that I didn't even know how to eat.
Yeah.
Not that I eat a lot of vegetables anyway, but it was like, because it was so local, there wasn't, like, much variety.
And that's actually the way it's supposed to be. I mean, if you think about it, like 100 years ago, you wouldn't be able to eat bananas and avocados, like, ever. Especially with maybe if you live in Florida, the avocados and mangoes grow and those types of fruits. But I don't know, I guess plantains grow in Florida. I don't know about banana trees. But I think that's a Southeast Asia thing. But, up here in the Midwest, all winter long, potatoes and carrots, beets.
Hearty.
Onions.
It's a hearty folk eating hearty food.
Yeah, like, it's just crazy, the food distribution system of how it comes from so far away. And then we have the same foods year round. I actually think it's bad for our digestion.
Do you?
I do.
Tell us more.
Not enough to actually stop eating bananas and avocados every day, which is, like, my favorite foods. But I do. I think that when you eat fermented foods like they did 100 years ago by canning, and I think when you eat local, there is something about how your body just, I think it goes through those seasons with the seasons, and I think it's good for your gut biome to have a break from certain foods. Because if you think about it, like, you couldn't eat cherries in December unless you, like, preserve them somehow. But it's like in the summer, to have that food just once a year, it's like your body's like, oh, this is new. I'm going to digest it differently.
Yeah.
It's like a seasonal switch up of the food.
Yeah.
I think it's good for us.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, that's what I was liking about intermittent fasting, is it just makes sense that our bodies have adapted to not be able to eat food whenever we want all the time.
Right.
That there would be periods, long periods of time perhaps, where you would go without food and then you just deal with it.
Right.
You're like, oh, we don't have food right now.
And
there's something too about, like, being excited for when it happens. Like, I love pomegranates. And so when it's, like, pomegranate season, I get super stoked. I know you feel that way, but artichokes.
Oh, I love artichokes. They're so good. I definitely feel that way about artichokes.
Yeah, and if you just, like, got it. I mean, I guess you can find them probably year round or close to it, but they're, like, so bad that it's just not even. It's better to just wait until they're in season and they're amazing.
So imagine if all of our food was homegrown like that, and we actually knew what the food tasted like when it was in season and ripe.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Well, I heard about with pineapple that there's I think it's bromelain that's in pineapple that's like a natural anti-inflammatory,
Mm-hmm.
but it only happens when it's allowed to ripen fully on the vine.
Interesting.
And so part of why people have such like strong or kind of allergic reactions or irritations from pineapple that they eat, it's because it ripens along the way as opposed to being on the vine.
Oh, so interesting.
So
I
when
didn't know
people are
that.
like, "Oh, pineapple is like it's an anti-inflammatory, it's good for you," I was told that it's only good for you if you pick it from the vine and you eat it.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was interesting to know, speaking of weird food things that we were just learning, about how all the eggs, if you buy eggs from the grocery store, how they're dipped in bleach. Did we talk about that in the last podcast? I can't remember.
I don't remember. But I met this farmer at an event that we were doing in Chicago, and it's awesome. He lives down the street, which I'm super stoked about. And he was saying that
Well, not down the street. He lives like 20
well,
minutes
he's like
away on
15
his farm.
minutes away, but
Yeah.
compared to like he's closer than Costco.
Yeah, totally.
So but earlier last year, I don't even know that I don't think I've talked about it here, but last year in the fall, I butchered a pig. I was just like, okay, if I'm gonna eat meat, I want to become more involved in the like supply chain of the food. And I'm not a huge pork guy, but Wyatt eats bacon like all the time. And so I was like, all right, like his grandfather, Polish farmer, like does the pig thing every year. And this year I was like, hey, can I get in on it? And he was like, sure, no problem. And so I think I got like half a pig. And he's like, well, you got to do all the stuff, And so I spent a couple days butchering, and we made our own sausage, and then it was smoked and all this stuff. And Jen hates hearing about this because she doesn't eat pork. Apologies to the vegetarian out there, but like
I don't hate hearing it. I actually think that if you're going to eat meat, then you have to be okay. Like for me, spiritually, if you're a meat eater, like think about this is why some people don't like to eat dinners with me, because if you're eating meat, know where the meat came from, know that it was a live animal, respect its life, and be okay with the death process, and that you are taking the life of that animal to support yourself and like be part of that journey. And cutting up a pig and butchering it is a big part of that ritual and that practice. And I think that if more people did that ritual, a lot things would be very different in our food system in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I just have so much more reverence for the meat, all meat, certainly, but especially when we eat stuff that came from that pig. I think reverence is a good thing to have, especially with the food. 'Cause I grew up, and I just never thought about where food came from. It wasn't something that was ever emphasized at my house, and so like I'm not sure how old I was when I made the connection of like what deli meat actually was. Like I was probably in college, maybe even a little older, before I like fully realized, like really felt and realized that when you're walking in the grocery store and you look at the deli counter, the animals behind all that's there.
Yeah.
Which is like kind of embarrassing to admit, but also like it just shows like how I grew up so kind of divorced from any kind of food consciousness. I mean, like when we were smoking weed in high school, my house was the best house to get high at because our pantry was just full of like sugar bombs. It was all the sugary stuff from Costco, like was our pantry. And so, and then on top of that, my mom would stress bake. So we had all the baked goods too. It was stoner paradise.
I can totally see that. Your mom is the best. She's such a great host.
I mean, she had no idea that that's what was happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, we'd go and it's like, it's a munchy central. So, now looking at kind of what I've learned and had to do because I was sick or chose to do because I was sick and all that, I'm just paying attention to food cycles and where food comes from. Especially now, as everyone's talking about supply chain shortages and food supply shortages and there's been like a whole bunch of food factories that have been burnt down. Like super weird. They say it's an accident, but also like how many things have to happen before you're like, maybe there's something nefarious happening here. Anyway, I was happy to connect with this farmer. So I'm butchering this pig. So I had this experience where I was butchering the pig, and as we were going through it, I saw like a couple of gray little masses. They were small, maybe the size of a dime, but I was like, this does not look right. This looks different than everything else.
Yeah.
And it turned out that I was like, Stanley, what is this? And he's like, oh, that's a tumor.
Ew.
Super gross. Super gross. And so I cut it out and we discarded it. But I was like, well, like, does this happen often? And he was like, yeah, sometimes you see it. And I was like, well, what happens in these like huge factory farm situations with like those animals? Surely, like if this one that we got from an Amish farm had tumors, like surely, like the horrible
factory farming.
Yeah, those things can't be good. I was like, well, what happens to that? Like, I couldn't imagine that there's like workers that are separating these things out and paying that close of attention.
Sure.
And he was like, oh, they just get ground in with like your meat.
Welcome to hot dogs.
Super gross, right? Well, I think it's just any kind of ground beef, any ground anything. It's just like a potpourri of things, including maybe tumors. So
I just threw up in my mouth a little bit.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. We came into this show not with like any agenda. We're just like
I was going to talk about eggs.
Oh, that's what we're talking. Yeah, okay, right. So anyway, my icebreaker, because I don't do small talk very well.
Everyone's just unsubscribed.
Yeah, my icebreaker when I saw that this guy had a meat truck and he was selling meat and stuff, was like, hey, I just butchered a pig, for the first time, and there were like tumors in the meat. Like, what the fuck? And the guy was like, yeah, okay, so where'd you get your animal from? And I said, well, it's from an Amish farm. And he's like, well, that's why. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, oh, they spray their things, like the feed and stuff. He's like, it's not like as organic and natural as you would think that it might be from an Amish farm.
Huh.
But he was saying that all of his stuff is not that way, that he was really sick himself. And he got tired of being on all these prescriptions, and he finally just told his doctors to get lost. And he's like, I went to food, and I was really careful and clean with my diet. And like within a few months, I was like healed. And he's like, so then I looked at my wife and I was like, we need to like make this possible for other people.
Wow.
And so they started farming and raising animals. And I was asking him about organic certification, and he said that, part of what he does to ensure the cleanness of his farm is he's gone to neighboring farms and he'll buy up, he'll pay them for the land, he'll pay them not to grow anything on the land that borders his farm, so that he can have an even wider buffer, so that none of their chemicals and fertilizers and like whatever Monsanto bullshit, none of that stuff gets in his property.
That's amazing. Did you see that statistic that 95% of urine has Roundup in it?
Wow.
Yeah. It's been going around on Instagram.
Wow.
I was shocked by that.
Crazy.
Even organic oat milk could potentially have Roundup in it. I didn't realize that oats are also sprayed with Roundup.
Dude. When I went to Europe, this has happened a few times when I've been to Europe. Let me know if this has happened to you, where like if I was eating a lot of gluten here in the U.S., I might get super bloated and not feel great. And then over there, I could eat all the bread in the world and be totally fine.
Yeah.
Like no issues.
I think that's pretty common.
It's super common, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and it's just because I think they have stricter laws on Monsanto and the genetically modified and all that stuff, and they just don't put as many preservatives in their food either. It's like you go to the bakery, you get a loaf of bread, and it's stale within a day and a half.
Right.
It's amazing.
It's the same thing with Mexico. I guess Mexico banned Monsanto a long time ago.
Oh, yay. Viva Mexico.
Yeah. What's up, United States? Why are we so far behind?
Yeah.
So interesting, though, how the food supply in the United States is really correlating to so much of the disease that we're seeing now.
I mean, it's crazy. Like the numbers, the stats of chronic disease in this country are staggering. And then, when you see it creeping into more and more kids and the number of like autism and birth defects and early childhood diseases is like through the roof. It's crazy.
Want to know another fun fact?
Sure, Jen.
Most umbilical cords at the time of birth, when they run tests on it, they find anywhere from 200 to 300 chemicals in the baby at birth through the umbilical cord.
Like synthetic chemicals?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. And that's like just
just
normal.
like mom's makeup and like whatever she's been eating and
breathing in
the plastics and all the things, huh?
So imagine this like perfectly pure little baby coming in the world has toxic overload, which is why so many kids have baby eczema or digestive issues or so many other things going on. It's crazy.
Yikes.
Yeah.
This podcast really took a turn.
I know.
Trying to keep the mood high.
I know, but
and now we're like gloom and doom with our food. Oh, so
well,
then
we'll
the whole
get
thing
to
was
that.
about
We'll get to that.
the eggs. So I'm talking to the farmer about all the things and then about food allergies and food sensitivities. And he's like, a lot of people are saying that they're sensitive to eggs now. And I've noticed that for me, that recently, some days I can eat eggs and it's totally fine. And other days, like I have a horrible gastric situation. And I've like controlled for everything else. And it seems to be the egg. It's so weird that that's happening now. I guess this is just what happens when you get older. You just start complaining about random body things that changed.
Maybe.
But he was saying, he's like, listen, he's like, come to the farm, get some of our eggs. It's like, I guarantee that's not going to happen to you. He said that any egg that is sold in a grocery store has to be dipped in bleach.
Well, and it's not just eggs, which is so crazy. I think it's pretty much everything. Like if it's produce, lettuce, blueberries, whatever it is, if it's coming to you in a store, like they have to make sure that it's sanitary, which I appreciate that like you're not biting into your apple and a giant worm comes out. And also the cost of that, not having a worm in your apple, is that it's dumped in bleach before it comes to you.
Yeah. I mean, the worm would probably be indicative that like, hey, there hasn't been poison sprayed all over this thing.
Totally. But like, imagine like how that would go for
Yeah.
Whole Foods. You're like, I bought this apple at Whole Foods, and then you like see a worm coming out. No one will buy apples from Whole Foods for the rest of forever.
I know. Could you imagine like my mom coming back from the grocery store?
I mean, and that's just the day and age we're living in, right? But I do think it goes back to the point of, you and I are working to grow our own garden and learn about plants and learn about food. And
you're going to start canning, right? You're going to have like a canning lesson from someone's mom.
Yeah, our friend's mom knows how to can, so she's going to teach us. And I think it's so cool because I didn't realize that most fermented foods in the United States, I mean, I'll eat sauerkraut or my pickled cabbage or pickles or whatever. I'll do my best to eat that stuff and kombucha and everything. But, like I said, 100 years ago, if you were eating, probably half of the food on your plate would have been a fermented canned food, and how different that is for our gut microbiome. And it just gets me thinking about this stuff. And I think it's kind of fun. I think it's like life, skill set. Like,
so do all foods that get canned, do they start fermenting? Is that the thing?
I think so.
I mean, that's what you're saying, right? Is it like increase in like the more things that you eat that are canned, the more like probiotics there are in it?
Right, but we're talking about like canning the process, not like in a tin can. It's very different.
Right.
Like in a glass jar.
Yeah, like grandma used to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I actually don't know. I mean, I don't know that much about canning. I'm actually really excited to learn more about it. But I do think that in that sealing process, and oftentimes it is in vinegar or something else that would ferment it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm actually really excited to learn more about it. But I do know that, everyone knows that adding more fermented foods into your diet is great for you.
Yeah, it's super valuable. I don't do it very much. I prefer to get my probiotics from a pill. But if you're into it's so hard to eat fermented foods. Well, every part of me that craves like good food and likes what I like and all that, the fermented food is just like, ugh. Whatever that flavor is like so
it's
harsh
vinegar.
to me.
It's vinegar.
No thanks.
Well, you might change your mind one day.
Yeah, might have to. If all we're left with is a head of broccoli that we grew and a bunch of canned foods.
Oh my gosh.
So you guys, eggs have come out naturally with like a protective coating on them. I remember when I was younger, we have family that lives in Arkansas, and I went to visit them. They had chickens, and I looked over on the counter, and they had all these eggs from their chickens just sitting on the counter. And I was like, you can't leave your eggs out on the counter. And they just laughed at me. They're like, oh, city boy, what do you know?
Right.
And they're like, no, we can. They're meant to be on the counter. Like, if you don't wipe off and like get rid of that protective coating, eggs can stay on the counter for a long time.
That's
And
amazing.
so, but like we have to refrigerate them because we've the providers, I guess, have wiped off that coating and maybe just dipped it in bleach. So the farmer was basically like, he's like, you're telling me that whatever they dip that in, if it's bleach, he's like that's not going to penetrate through that little eggshell and get into the egg. He's like, of course it is. So the thing that most caught my attention was he was saying that that a few doctors recommend his farm and their meats for their cancer patients because they know that it's like as clean as it gets for the food, and people with like really bad food sensitivities, that his stuff is safe to eat,
That's amazing.
which is so cool.
That's great.
Yeah. So
Do you remember
we're
the
gonna
name of the farm? We should give them a shout out.
yeah, it's called Happy Life Farms. So I got a couple steaks and we cooked those, and those were pretty good. And I'm gonna go over this week and hopefully this week and check out the farm. We should take Wyatt over there.
Yeah.
I think he's got llamas too.
I love llamas. I'm more into the wool from the llamas than everything else.
Yeah.
And the eggs. I'm into the eggs.
Yeah. So we're gonna check it out. But it also feels really good to like have a local source, like eating local.
And that's where we get to the happy part of the podcast of, like health in this country is an issue. I think we read a statistic the other day that less than 4% of the population has optimal blood work when they go to the doctor's office.
Yeah. How crazy is that? Sorry, we did hear about that. How crazy is that? Only 4 to 6% of the United States population is like within optimal range with their blood works.
That's crazy to me. That's 94 to 96% of the population is unhealthy when they get their blood work.
Yeah.
And that just, to me, when I hear that, it just relates 100% back to food. It's like, what are we eating? What are we doing?
This is the happy part of the podcast?
Yeah, because we can do something about it. Because, like you, I, growing up and many years of my life, was really unconscious about what I was eating and where it was coming from and what it was doing for me, and, eating Oreos and all the things. And not
Oreos
really.
are vegan.
Oreos are vegan.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're horrible for you. Look at the ingredients on the back. Just because it's vegan does not mean that it's good for you. In fact, oftentimes the vegan food is the worst because it's like Franken food.
I used to know a guy who was like an executive for Nabisco, and he said that the worst food to eat of theirs, like when it comes right off of the factory line, is an Oreo. He's like, you need it to cool down, and that stuff has to congeal for it to be good.
Oh, that's so wicked. That's so crazy. But if you think about it, like all of these foods are so delicious. Like they're made to hit all of our pleasure response and like hunger systems. And we are just wasting away from it. It's like if people were actually growing food in their backyard, if they, are finding the local farmers near them and connecting with the local farmers and being a part of the process, even getting their own chickens. If you can get your own chickens in your backyard, I would love to do that. Obviously the HOA doesn't allow chickens, but we have looked into quail, which apparently if you have HOA, you can get quail instead of chickens, and they will provide a smaller egg, but it's similar. And then you can, have your own egg source, which I think is kind of cool. I'm into getting quail. I'm sure Starlight would love that.
Sure
Our cat.
Yeah.
The cat will just be sitting there trying to eat the quail.
Well, one of the things that I've been doing, it's funny that we're talking about this because one of the things that I've been doing, I didn't even tell you, like the last couple of weeks, is trying to be much more conscious when I'm eating and asking myself, like, do I want to eat this? Trying to look at the conditioning that I've had around food. Am I eating this just out of habit? Am I craving this just because I made a decision when I was 4 years old or 5 years old or 10 years old that like this is the food that I like to eat, and I've just been doing that and doing that and doing that, even if it's at like great harm to my body. And so I've been working on, I'm certainly not doing it every meal because I just forget, but really trying to pay more attention to say, okay, is this food that I want to be eating? Like me now at 42, almost 43 years old, is this the food that I want to be choosing to nurture this body?
Mm.
This machine, this organism that I call my home, internally here? Or am I continuing to eat based on decisions that I made a long time ago, so that then anytime it's mealtime, I just sort of flip a switch and become unconscious and gobble up whatever?
Oh, this is great. I'm going to ask you this for when you forget.
Yeah, it's awesome. You should. And it's like I've been having more smoothies and more shakes and stuff like that. And we have really been eating more seasonally. Like we've been having a lot more smoothies lately, and we didn't really have it that much in the wintertime.
No.
And so, there is a lot of that's been changing a little bit of like how I've been eating. I haven't made any like massive wholesale changes yet, but just being in that process of questioning is valuable. And that's where even the thing about like sauerkraut and fermented foods, it was like, as I was saying that, I was thinking, well, like that was a decision that I made a long time ago, that I don't like that flavor.
Mm-hmm.
And now every time I smell vinegar, I'm not really crazy about it.
Right.
But also, like, at that same breath, I'm also not free in this moment to love vinegar or to be craving sauerkraut, because I've made the decision so many times before that I don't like it.
Mm.
And as part of my whole thing of like, I want to be able to go anywhere, be with anyone, feel however I want to feel, being able to be able to be free in any moment to experience something is of utmost value to me.
Mm.
And when it comes to food, I realize I really haven't been free to experience. I've been following whatever like younger version of me has decided. And it's not often that I like question that over and over again.
Yeah.
And even then, it's like I had like one night we had a, I don't know, vegetarian meal or something. And I got really hungry after like an hour and a half of eating our meal, as can happen with being vegetarian.
Yeah.
And I started to get kind of annoyed by that. And I was like, oh, wow, I'm not even free to experience like hunger and disappointment. I was like, there was that part of me that was like, I got to go change it. I have to go like shove my face with other food. Instead of being like, well, okay, like I'm hungry, like I'm experiencing a sensation, but is it really true hunger? Is it boredom? Is it, frustration? Or is it just a different sensation because I'm used to eating so much meat?
It's a different sensation because you're used to eating so much meat.
Yeah, but like totally. And looking at that kind of unconscious sort of programming and asking myself every time, especially like around mealtime, like, am I free to experience this? Like, do I really want to be eating this slice of pizza, or do I really need these French fries? Or is my body actually, if I'm really quiet enough, is my body craving broccoli or sauerkraut? Or is there some mussels or something else that, I wouldn't even think about necessarily, because I'm just so used to this conditioned approach to food. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I love that.
Yeah, so that's like a little experiment I've been running the last couple of weeks. I haven't even told you about it.
Yeah, I know. This is like news
I
to
like
me.
have a whole world. In case you didn't know, I have like a whole world that's my own.
I'm
Okay? Like we live together, but you're not invited into everything all the time right away. I need some things to myself.
Oh my gosh, you're hysterical. I'm like, I think I have the opposite problem where I question everything that I eat all the time.
You're
to
in a
the
whole
point
other
of
thing
like,
right now.
where I'm like, is this chickpea good for me or is it bad for me? Is kale good for me or is kale bad for me? It's like, I get in my head a lot about that because there's so much conflicting information out there about food.
Yeah.
It's like really intense for me.
Yeah.
Maybe other people don't have that problem. But if you've had controversial food advice and you've tried different things and you're like, what do I eat? I'm with you. I totally get it.
Well, that's just the way it is now. I mean, with the supply chain being what it is really like you're sort of picking your poison, even if you're eating like as well as you can. I mean, like before we planted our garden, like the week before, we have an indoor tower garden where I was growing a lot of like buttery lettuce, and we made a salad. And Jen was like, oh, there's not enough crunch in here. I need something like kale to get more crunch in my salads. And then next week, I planted our outside garden, and I just planted a bunch of kale for Jen.
It was so nice of him.
Yeah, kale's like awesome. It grows. It was awesome. I hate it though. I can't digest it at all. Well, I couldn't digest it. Who knows? Maybe in the next time I eat it, it'll be a totally different experience. But then like 3 weeks into the growing of the kale is starting to like spread out and flower, like, just be awesome. Jen's not eating it. She's not touching it. I was like, what is the deal?
Well, I read a post from Dave Asprey, the bulletproof guy, who was talking about how kale actually inhibits the absorption of nutrients in your gut, and that it's actually one of the worst, like, quote unquote, health foods that you could possibly eat, and it's actually not good for your gut at all.
I mean, damn.
I know. I still eat the kale because I'm like, I think it's good for you still. Greens, how could it really be bad for you? I mean, come on.
Yeah, and we grew it.
Yeah.
Backyard,
So I love
backyard kale.
But it's funny how like there's so many like controversial points. It's like celery juice, medical medium. Everything is like, oh, celery juice is amazing. And then you have like all the other people who are like, no, celery is a dirty vegetable and it's like absorbs everything. And like you shouldn't drink celery because it's like basically like water with hair in it. It's like
hairy water.
Hairy water. It's like, that's sucked up all the toxins. So
yeah, or even like juicing or, like.
Should you juice or should you not juice?
Yeah, it's like, well, it gets rid of the fiber. It's just like a sugar, a shock of sugar to the system. And it's like, well, if that's the only way I'm going to get greens, should I do it or not? And,
That's what I'm saying. It's like if you really get intense about questioning all the things, it's not good for you.
So what's the way out? I mean, for me, it's like
you just eat stuff.
Just eat it and then see how you feel.
Well, I think actually, which is something that I've been working on, which you probably know, but is to just really be present to my food when I'm eating it. Because I feel like it's so easy nowadays. It's like I really have to fight the urge to put my phone down. And like, 'cause it's so easy to just watch TV or like, be on your phone texting something or even on my computer answering emails or whatever it is, distracted by technology while you're eating. And, so much of what we talk about in living consciously and being present and Tantra really is like experiencing the senses and really being present with your food and like grounding your feet on the ground, taking deep breaths and feeling the food and really taking your time to chew it and experience the flavors and how does my body feel as I eat it and talking to your body as you eat, because I think a big portion of how well we digest is what we say about the food when we eat it. Because if you're the type of person that's like, you eat some birthday cake and you're like, oh my gosh, you're on some strict diet or something. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is horrible for me. I shouldn't have eaten that. And it's like all this guilt and shame that you're eating when you eat the birthday cake. I think that your body actually digests that differently than if you would eat the birthday cake and you're like, oh my God, I love this birthday cake. It's so awesome. Like, this is delicious. This is like, I'm having the best time at this birthday party or my birthday or whatever it is. And you're happy and joyous and like just indulging and feeling that. I think your body digests. If it's the same cake, I think you digest the cake differently based on the emotions that you put into it.
Yeah.
So for me, I've been watching and like sitting with that stuff.
Well, there's a whole slow food movement. They say that digestion really begins in the mouth.
Yeah.
And so I did this experiment years ago for a little bit, which is to try to chew every bite of food 100 times.
100 times?
100 times. And the slogan in this movement is chew your liquids and drink your solids. The idea being that you've chewed it so much that it turns really liquid in your mouth. And then if you're drinking, to like keep that in your mouth for a longer too, like where you're chewing the liquid.
Wow, it's a long time, 100.
It's crazy. The meals take forever.
It's like 3 hours every time you eat.
It's a lot. I mean, you shoot for 100 bites, but like it's not gonna, 100 chews, but it's not gonna be that way. But your jaw is definitely sore. But one of the things you realize doing that is like you want to eat really good food because stuff that you might take 2 bites of and then scarf down. Like if you got to chew that like horrible, like that horrible shit in your mouth for 100 bites and like where whatever that chemical mess is like turns into some version of a liquid in your mouth.
Ew.
It's so gross. I'm going to have to give a warning not to listen to this episode with food.
Warning, food trigger. Food trigger episode.
Oh my gosh. But then also to pay attention to how you feel afterwards, right? Like one of the biggest misconceptions is like you shouldn't feel tired after you eat. If you feel really tired after you eat, it's because you've either eaten foods that your body's reacting to, or you just didn't have that kind of strength of the digestive tract anyway. So, and one of my little cheats around all this too is the digestive enzymes. I love Doterra Terrazymes. I mean, I was taking different ones before I knew about Doterra, but their Terrazymes are great, and it helps to break the food down. You can even see a video on YouTube if you type in like Terrazyme and oatmeal, where they compare like regular oatmeal and then an oatmeal that has Terrazymes put into it, and you can just see the Terrazymes dissolving the oatmeal.
Yeah, it's
like
cool.
digestive chi in a bottle.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So, and I totally hear you about having a hard time putting the phone down. Now that I'm a TikTok influencer, while I gotta like resist from talking to all of the people while I'm eating too.
Yeah, but I think it's such a big thing. I mean, think about how many times we eat a day. I mean, I'm the queen of, running around and scarfing something. Like, gosh, when I was teaching 5 or 6 yoga classes a day, I would literally like eat a banana and like smash something and like power bar in the car like 5 minutes before I would be going between clients, and it was just like starvation basically for the whole day. And then I'd be so hungry by the time I'd get food. It was just like, I didn't even look at it. It's just eat it whole, like teenager style, and I do really think it takes a toll on your digestive tract.
Yeah. Yeah. So being really intentional about like that whole eating process and, yeah.
And
Wow.
how cool that like we can just do that. I mean, if we just pretend like we live 100 years ago where we just have to sit with our family, look at the food, eat the food, know that it came from somewhere near us, within 100 miles maybe, and that you're just there, you're just eating. Like, I think that that's great. Simpler times, there's a lot of lessons from the simpler times that I think that if we incorporated some of those rituals with food and with being present into our life, like into our lives, I do think that a lot of the disease and the issues that we're having as a society, I think would be a lot less.
Yeah, like the work lunch is like the worst thing that you could do for your digestion.
Totally. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so stressful.
Totally.
It's like, or like not sitting down when you eat. Like, I'm guilty of that. I think I just did it 2 days ago. I was like walking around their house, like playing with a cat while I was eating my breakfast. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I need to sit, put my feet on the ground, breathe, feel the food, smell it. But it's just, we live in such a day and age of convenience and multitasking and screens that it's actually a real challenge to sit down and be present with the food.
Yeah. I had a client who was, he was a manager, and he would, when it was time for his employees to have the reviews, he would take them out to whatever their favorite restaurant was. Mm-hmm. He's like, we have lunch and then I give them the review at the end. And I was like, dude, if you care about these people and like, just give them, if the reviews are good, like give them the review first and then go out to lunch.
Right.
Because they don't know what's going to happen. They're going to be so nervous the whole time. Like, you're trying to do a nice thing by going to the restaurant that they love, but they're not going to be enjoying that food because they're waiting to hear what's happening with the review.
Right.
I was like, do the review and then have a celebratory lunch after.
Right.
So.
Didn't one guy like salt his food without tasting it and then he got fired?
What?
Oh, well, I'll tell that story. So I heard that maybe it was a job interview or it was something. I thought maybe it was a review. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't from you. But this guy was eating dinner with a fellow colleague. Obviously, he had the ability to fire this guy. And the guy got his food, and without tasting it, he just put salt all over it. Without just like, because that's what he does automatically.
Yeah.
And the guy fired him.
Like unconscious behaviors.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and the guy fired him because he said, I can't trust you because you unconsciously are salting your food before you taste it. Like, what else are you doing?
I've never heard that. That's amazing.
Oh, yeah.
That's great.
I don't know where I heard that, but I thought that was really interesting.
That's a good story. All right, guys. So pay attention to what you eat this week, huh? We're all in this together.
And let us know how it goes.
Let us know how it goes. You can
are
hit
you
us
team
up,
celery or are you team kale?
All right. We love you guys. Thank you so much for listening and for your ongoing support. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.